Welcome back. I think we're on to episode 5 now of Miller's Movers. Be a bit of a brief one this week. There's plenty of fairly lively ground around. That's meant small fields, and of course, small fields mean that you get less runners to look at, less horses that are effectively perhaps hiding away their ability or otherwise. So it'll be a bit quicker this week, but hopefully the rain will come and we'll get back into a full-length episode next week. So first off, we'll start with a quick look at the weekend's action. Was largely centred on Saturday around Aintree and Wincanton. At Aintree, we have to mention the novice hurdle performance of Mr. Meggit. Had some really good bumper form last year. He disappointed at Aintree in the bumper at the final end of the season, but I think he had excuses there. And he was entitled to do, I think, what he did on Saturday, but it was still good to see him go and win in such style. He travelled very nicely the race. He jumped very soundly. John O'Neill was afforded the luxury of really being able to educate him and look after him at his hurdles. Didn't have to do anything silly. Had plenty of confidence coming down to the last. The only question was going to be, would he pick up when he landed? But he duly did quicken up like a really smart horse. I think they're now going to look to perhaps go to the Djelo hurdle, which is shaping up to be quite a decent race. You've got the New Lion and Quebecois, who both won a novice hurdle division at Chepstow earlier this month. They look solid yardsticks. Does look like the Djelo hurdle will be a decent enough race. And I like Mr. Meggit. I think he went through the race really nicely. He looks like a classy horse. My one concern always with the John O'Neill yards is just whether they can maintain their early season form throughout the winter. They often tail off in the mid part of the winter. Got AJ O'Neill on the licence now. Things do seem to be a bit more consistent. Their novice chasers are jumping well. It might just be that Mr. Meggit's able to hold his form through the winter. And if he does, he looks like a very useful addition to the novice hurdle ranks. The feature race of the day was the Grand Sefton Chase, won in really good style by King Turgeon. I question on the SBK betting podcast whether he'd have the natural pace to lie up over a 2 mile 5 furlong trip on quick enough ground, given he'd won over much further at Chepstow the time before. But he jumped beautifully, and that kept him in contention. He certainly had the gears to hold a position, and it became pretty evident, I felt, that once they were turning in across the Melling Road, the fact that he was still there and still travelling, he was always going to stay the best of those that were left in contention, and he duly did. He pulled away some more sound jumps up the home straight, pulled away nicely from the elbow, and won, I think, with a good degree in hand. He's only gone up £4 to a mark of 133. That doesn't seem an unreasonable rise. Would just point out, though, that £4 rise is effectively a £6 rise next time you see him out, because he was £2 well in on Saturday. But mark of 133 is by no means going to stop him, I don't think. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him return to the Beecher Chase, where his good jumping, his proven stamina would make him a formidable force. At Wincanton, again, quite small fields, but Rubaud was really impressive in winning the elite hurdle. He jumps so well, he travels so well. He's probably better on a right-handed track and probably better on a flat track. But he's gone up £2 for that win to a mark of 149. Brentford Hope, a solid yardstick, back in second. He was given weight away to him. Brentford Hope may be better on slightly slower ground, but I still thought Rubaud was impressive in making it 2 from 2 this season. They're now going to go over fences. It's got a mark of 149. Like I said, he's a very economical, accurate jumper. I think if he can take to fences, and I have absolutely no reason to think whatsoever that he won't, he's going to improve this rating of 149 considerably, because you get more jumping efforts in a 2 mile chase than you do a 2 mile hurdle. Therefore, he's going to be seen to better effect because his main attribute is going to be emphasised. So probably better right-handed. There's plenty of right-handed novice chasers. You know, you could look at graded chasers at Kempton going forwards. I think he'll take high rank amongst certainly the UK-based novice chasers this season. I think he's been well campaigned by Paul Nicholls, and I would certainly expect him to rate higher over fences than he does over hurdles. The feature race of the day was the Badger Beers Chase, and you'd have to have a heart of stone not to enjoy watching Al Dancer, 11 years of age, make all the running and gallop out a very powerful and impressive winner. As to what the form is worth, I'm not quite so sure. The race was blown apart from a very early stage. Callum Pritchard went forward on Al Dancer, or Al Dancer took Callum Pritchard forward. You can make your mind up on that one. Sam Thomas did say that the horse is better when he feels like he's got more control, and it meant the field was strung out from a long, long way out. You then had the falls of the Changing Man, who was sent off favourite, and Remastered, who looks to be back to something like his best form in the closing stages. That hampered a couple that were trying to close. So quite what the form is worth, I'm not sure. It's probably a form line that I will look to oppose on a literal basis. But Al Dancer was just brilliant. A front-running grey, staying like that. And he's now won 5 of his first 6 starts in the last 6 seasons, I should say. Callum Pritchard got plenty of hype coming into this season, and he looked useful here. I'd actually had him down as a negative against Al Dancer. He'd won at Chepstow on Idex de Serge for Rebecca Curtis earlier in the week, and I thought he won in spite of his ride. I thought he was quite negative over the fences. I suspect that Al Dancer perhaps took him forward here and encouraged him to be a little bit braver, and it certainly paid off. Now, if he's going to take that experience and go forwards, he could well be a valuable £7 conditional claim. But very often with the conditional ranks, the mainstream media are very keen to find a conditional jockey to latch onto. I think that's Callum this year. You might find that actually some of his rides don't offer as much value because his booking will have been overhyped. You also have to factor in that because he's going to be a well-hyped conditioner, he is going to get booked for plenty of good horses. But I wouldn't get too carried away with him just yet. I think he's clearly a very nice lad, spoke well in the interview, rode Al Dancer beautifully, but one good ride doesn't make a champion, and I'll be keen to see what he does going forward, and I will perhaps look to maybe oppose him on a few occasions. So that was Saturday from Aintree and Wincanton. We should touch on Sunday, and Sunday really focuses around two blowouts, one at Sandown and one at Naas. Naas came in the Grade 3 Barberstown Chase, where we saw the return of Marine Nationale. He had his novice chase campaign cut short last year when a few issues were found when he didn't quite show his form, and I think plenty of people were hoping that receiving weight from Quebec's Quilixios, £4 from him in the Barberstown Chase, would see him bounce back to form on ground that should have been ideal for him. It was disappointing again. He just doesn't seem to have the scope or the heart for fences. He's always looking to chip in a short stride. He was occasionally going right. He didn't really have a cut at his fences unless absolutely forced down by jockey Michael O'Sullivan, which of course you can't do at every fence. And then more worrying still was, despite not jumping all that well, his finishing effort didn't look that powerful either. Eventually beaten 7.5 lengths, like I said, getting that £4 from Quilixios. It just does seem to me that chasing is not his game. His trainer, Barry Connell, is not always keen to listen to advice. He seems to make an opinion and like to stick to it. This horse has surely got to go back over hurdles. I had a quick look. He's 40-1 for the champion hurdle, but on greater reflection, the fact that the engine is perhaps not looking as solid as it did when he was an impressive winner of the Supreme Novices Hurdle would even temper your enthusiasm for the champion hurdle back over hurdles at a big price. Be interested to see what they do with him now. I think he's got to come back over hurdles. I don't think he jumps anywhere near well enough to be a graded chaser in open company over 2 miles. So Barry Connell, I think, needs to relook, make a new plan, and go again. It is still early in the season. It's still very early in this horse's career, so all is not lost. Another horse that is in the early part of his career is Jeriko Du Reponet, and he, by all accounts, had a terrible time at Sandown. I wasn't watching it, but apparently he was very difficult to saddle, and there was some discomfort with the fact that this wasn't really relayed very well to the viewing public. As for the race itself, I've watched that. He ballooned the second fence, landed very steeply. That would have perhaps shaken his confidence a little bit. But I thought going down the back at Sand, and he got into a better rhythm. He was starting to jump efficiently and nicely, and then made another mistake. Landed in the middle of the fence, just completely guessed it. On the interviews afterwards, Nico de Boinville said that he actually slipped on takeoff, and that caused him to lose any perch on the ground and therefore land in the fence. But that was going to shake his confidence even further. I think it was a perfectly sensible thing to do to pull up Jeriko Du Reponet. Of course, social media, as you'd expect with a Nicky Henderson horse that's been perhaps wrapped in cotton wool, as they would like to say, erupted, and there was all sorts of things said. You'll see it time and time again this season, novice chasers just not jumping quite as well as they have at home when getting on the racetrack, and I think that's perfectly the case here with Jeriko Du Reponet. He's clearly a horse of immense potential. The fact they pulled him up is no bad thing at all. You know, just on Monday had Caliph de Burley falling on his chase debut. He's none the worse for it. You didn't see anywhere near the negative vibes for that. You know, if Nico de Boinville had plopped off the side of Jeriko Du Reponet, it would have been an unseated rider, and that would be that. The fact that he pulled him up when the winning chance has gone, in my mind, gives the horse every chance of coming back this season and achieving what his potential allows him to do. He'll have to have plenty of schooling. He's bound to get that at 7 Barrows, but I wouldn't be giving up on Jeriko Du Reponet just yet. He's clearly got a big engine. He's clearly well thought of, and he clearly can jump. He jumped very soundly, bar those 2 mistakes. Now, of course, you have to iron those out, but there's every chance with a bit more practice and a bit more luck in running, that Jeriko Du Reponet will still make up into a graded novice chaser. On to handicap movers and shakers now, and we'll start with horses going up in the handicap. And the first one we're going to talk about is Aurigny Mill for Robert Walford, who's got a really severe hike, I felt, of £7 up to a mark of 135. He won a conditional jockey's hurdle at Newbury, picked up the pieces late on, I felt, was given a really nice patient ride. The eventual second from the Chris Gordon yard went too hard through the early and mid part of the race, paid the price up the home straight. Aurigny Mill, who's a horse best seen to effect when ridden off the pace in a strongly run race, and a small field as well, had perfect conditions to pick up that winner. Looked very impressive in doing so, but he's up now to a mark of 135, up that £7. That is some way above any mark he's ever looked like coping with before, and it does put him in a better grade of race as well. He tried the Betfair hurdle last year and ran no sort of race at all, and afterwards they said that he was never really able to get settled in a big field handicap where the pace was strong from the outset. So that's possibly going to cause problems for Aurigny Mill going forwards now. £7 rise, I thought, seemed harsh, and he'll be a horse that I'll be keen to oppose going forward into these better handicaps for Robert Walford. Masaccio also won at Newbury. He's gone up £6 to a mark of 137, but I think that rise is perfectly fair. He made a few fiddly jumping errors on this chasing debut at Newbury, but he picked up really well over the last couple of fences, jumped probably the best he did when under pressure, stayed powerfully, drew clear. He's already a 2 mile 5 furlong winner at Kempton, so this 2 mile 4 round Newbury on quick enough ground was probably at the very minimum of his range. And I think on softer ground or a stiffer track, more a stiffer test, he's capable of defying this mark of 137. And although he did run poorly over 3 miles at Ayr when tried last year, I don't think that was down to the trip. He was never winning that at any point of the race. Allen King's Yard, which is a little bit in and out of form in the spring, bounced back to win at finished second at Aintree in the spring. He's a mark of 137. He jumped really well when under pressure. I think he's going to come forward plenty for this run, as Allen King's do. And I think Masaccio, off a mark of 137, can still win a couple more novice chases or novice handicap chases off that mark. The feature race of the day from Exeter on Friday was the Holden Gold Cup, won in really good style by JPR1. Travelled like a class horse, jumped beautifully throughout, and won, I thought, with a little bit of ease. He's got up to a mark of 154 now. I'm not going to feature him in Handicap Movers and Shakers because I think that undoubtedly puts him now into the realms of graded contests. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him go to Sandown for the Tingle Creek. And the 2 mile chase division, certainly in the UK, doesn't have a real solid hierarchy to it. Every one of the seasoned campaigners has got their foibles, they've got their quirks. I think that JPR1, still a young horse, still improving, has got every chance of really shaking up the 2 mile chase division in the UK. But in terms of handicap movers and shakers, I thought the interesting one to come out of the Holden Gold Cup was the runner-up Djelo. He's got up £2 now to a mark of 149. I saw a few people question the ride that Charlie Deutsch gave Djelo. Now, I'm a fully signed up member of the Charlie Deutsch fan club. I love how he rides, so maybe I look through slightly skewed lenses, but to my mind I felt Djelo was in top gear the whole way on fairly quick ground over his minimum trip, and that meant that he produced a number of fiddly jumping efforts which were constantly putting him on the back foot. I thought he was nursed really beautifully in the race to have any sort of chance whatsoever turning in. He again met the last fence wrong. That put him on the back foot. JPR1 had jumped very soundly throughout, had conserved plenty of energy, and although Djelo was closing at the end, I think JPR1 had plenty up his sleeve. But this was a really promising seasonal debut for Djelo. He's a horse I put up as a horse to follow into open company this year. He'll go up in trip now, or this trip on softer ground. He's only gone up £2 to a mark of 149. I still think that makes him a very well handicapped horse. And on slightly slower ground, I think you'll see him jump better as well. So wouldn't be giving up on Djelo at all for Venetia Williams. Charlie Deutsch off a mark of 149. Moving forward, I think his optimum trip is 2 miles 4, and I think he'll even stay a little bit further. Imperial Saint was given as a horse to follow after he won his novice chase earlier this season at Aintree, and he duly returned to that same course and distance and bolted up for the second time. He's gone up £10 now to a mark of 138, but he travelled like a very class horse through that race, was giving lumps of weight away to his rivals, but it was clear that Mikael Nolan had plenty of confidence in him, picked them up the home straight, and what I was really impressed by was how easily he drew alongside and drew clear with very minimal urgings, jumped the last beautifully, stayed on powerfully. This was still over 2 miles. He's got proven hurdle form over 2 mile 4, so he is going to stay further. A £10 rise is fairly hefty, but he's up to a mark of 138. He's going to have to go into better races, but they still have up the sleeve the fact that he will stay further, and going up in trip might well elicit further improvement. So 138 might well not prove beyond Imperial Saint for Philip Hobbs and Johnson White. And then one final horse going up in the handicap is Javert Allen for Jane Williams. He made what I would think was probably one of the best novice chase debuts I've seen. He jumped from fence to fence at Chepstow, showed so much scope, so much athletic ability, never saw another rival, drew clear and stayed on well up the home straight. Despite being a first-time out horse for Jane Williams, you would normally expect them to improve for the run. He's gone up £5 to a mark of 120. He's got novice hurdle form last year and handicap hurdle form behind Lowry's Bar. He's rated 130. I think given that Javert Allen jumped so well, sound jumping in chases is such a huge weapon to have because you're gaining cheap and easy lengths at fences, conserving plenty of energy. I'd be very surprised if Javert Allen doesn't rack up a little sequence if kept to a reasonable grade over fences for Jane Williams. Just one horse going down the handicap that caught the eye this week, and that's Schmillson for Ollie Murphy. He finished third in the conditional jockeys handicap hurdle at Newbury, won by Aurigny Mill. He's gone down £1 to a mark of 117, and I didn't think the effort at Newbury was all that bad. He got taken out of his ground in the mid part of the race. He didn't quite have the gears to hold his position on that quick ground, but stayed on well up the home straight, did some decent late work. He's gone down to 117. He was a winner off 114, an impressive winner off 114 as well. I think it was perhaps the way the race was run at Newbury that transpired against him, not necessarily his mark of 118. So the fact he's come down £1, I think, is generous. And I think in a race where it's run at a more even tempo, perhaps on slower ground, that means he doesn't get quite so far back, will certainly suit Schmillson. And I would be very surprised if Ollie Murphy doesn't get this horse picking up the winning thread very soon. And then finally, 3 new entries for you to put into your tracker. The first is Jurancon for David Pipe. He was an impressive novice hurdle winner at Chepstow last week. He's been given an opening mark of 123. He beat Tripoli Flyer, who brought very good bumper form to that novice contest at Chepstow. Saw him off nicely. Prior to that, he was second at Worcester, just beaten just under a length by the Kemble Brewery. He's rated 125. He won at Foss Lass and won very easily in a weak enough race, but the form looks solid. And I think Jurancon will certainly stay further than this 2-mile trip. Stays powerfully, jumps really well. David Pipe's putting together a smart team of horses, and I thought a mark of 123 was more than lenient, especially if going up in trip and getting a little bit of slower ground. So Jurancon should certainly go into your tracker. Tying in somewhat with that form is Hartington for Joe Tizard. Now, he was having his third run over hurdles, third run to get a mark really at Newbury, when he picked up the pieces and actually ended up winning when Royce under Ben Jones set far too hard fractions. Royce stopped to nothing up the home straight, found very little off the bridle, and Hartington, who'd been ridden with great restraint, was able to come through, pick up the pieces. I don't think that was really the plan. I think they were expecting to pop round the back, get their third run under their belt and get a nice handicap mark. But he duly won. He was 5th at Worcester, behind Jurancon and the Kemble Brewery. I thought that looked like a strong piece of form. He got outpaced there. He was staying on in the closing stages. He's been given a mark of just 115. I'm sure they will still look to go up in trip with this horse now. He's a dour stayer in the making, and 115 is certainly not going to see this horse fail to win this season. And then the final horse getting a new entry and a new mark this week is Sorceleur for Paul Nicholls. He won 2 in 2 days at Exeter and Wincanton. He's been given an opening mark of 122. Now, the very bare form makes this horse very hard to assess. He won odds on, as he was entitled to do, but the thing that struck me the most was at both Exeter on Friday and at Wincanton on Saturday, it took Harry Cobden a very long time to pull him up. He went far around the track, really took a good grip. Suggests to me this is a horse with a big engine. He had pretty decent bumper form last year. He was second on his hurdle debut early this year, but that was at a time when Paul Nicholls' horses were needing the run. He's got a mark of 122. Those 2 runs in 2 days, I'm sure he'll get a decent break now. But my intuition says that this mark of 122 is lean, and this is a horse with a big engine, very nice pedigree by Saint de Saint. I think this horse will hear plenty more about, and I'd be very surprised indeed if Paul Nicholls doesn't line up a nice handicap race for him. And in a handicap, this quite keen-going horse is going to be able to settle better because there'll be a stronger pace. I don't think small fields necessarily suited him well. They've got his handicap mark very early in the season. I think they'll freshen him up. Sorceleur should definitely go in your notebook for future handicaps. So that's it for Miller's Movers episode 5. Like I said, a little bit briefer this week with not so many runners because of the quick ground. I'll be back next week where we'll be reviewing the good card at Cheltenham this weekend. Hopefully a bit of rain will come so we get plenty of decent sized fields there. It normally throws up plenty of eye catchers. So I'll see you same time next week.